It seems like everyone wants an exotic car these days, and if you're chronically online, it might seem like everyone except you is rich and has an exotic car. But I promise you, with the way the values have gone on some of these cars, you might actually be closer to attaining one of these cars than you thought. Today I want to talk about cars that have that exotic appeal. High-end finishes, luxury features, and exceptional design and performance that got hit with depreciation like a freight train, and might be much cheaper than you ever imagined. That being said, I have to preface this by saying that I do not recommend buying any of these cars. They depreciated hard for a reason. But if you understand what you're getting into, they represent a lot of value on the secondhand market. What you're getting in this video are cars that should not be attainable within certain tax brackets, but because of huge hits and depreciation, a guy like you might finally be able to finance one. Roll the intro.
Hi guys, I'm Shmi and you're watching Vinstagram.
The McLaren 600 LT started at an MSRP of $259,000 in the States, and understandably so. It was the smallest, most extreme car that McLaren offered at the time. This is McLaren's 911 GT3 RS, except it's even more extreme. I've ridden shotgun in one of these and ended up with a nauseating headache. We were flying around Charleston one weekend and I was progressively getting more and more sick. We got back to the owner's house and I asked where the bathroom was. I never told anyone this, but I went to take a piss and ended up just dry heaving over the toilet. I don't think this will happen to everyone that rides in a 600 LT. I just get motion sick very easily, but this car does not make it easier at all. With the hard Senna style carbon fiber bucket seats bolted to the chassis, sending every vibration from the road through the stiff suspension and straight up your spine. The induction noise coming out the side intake straight at you the entire time is harsh. It's not a car that the average person can just casually stomach on a daily basis. If that's your goal in buying a McLaren, then maybe a 570S or a 720S is more your speed. But if you want something this hardcore and extreme, it's your lucky day. Possibly even your lucky year, because right now you can find a McLaren 600 LT for under $200,000 all day. Okay, maybe not all day, but like you could for sure find them, and they're gonna have some miles on them, but like they certainly exist. McLaren's might be the king of depreciation in the supercar world, possibly for good reason. Of course, like I said, cheaper examples are gonna have some miles on them. They aren't gonna be pristine, but what you're getting is the most extreme, highest performance version of the 570S bar, maybe the 620R, and potentially in the $160,000 range. Now, if you want a British luxury SUV for when you get tired of getting your ass kicked by your hardcore British track car, you can legitimately buy a Bentayga for under $100,000 all day. And not just some base spec V8 either. You can get W12s for under $100,000. Again, I'm not saying that I suggest that you buy some of these cars, but you can't deny that you're getting an exquisite design, a luxury interior worthy of a $300,000 price tag, and an engine with more than enough torque to get you where you need to go with a smooth power delivery for cheaper than a Ram TRX. Also, there are Facebook groups for guys that like this kind of torture. There are people who genuinely like buying very depreciated Bentleys, and forum posts and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of information out there for people who genuinely want to work on these and do the maintenance themselves to save the money, because trust me, it does get expensive. If you want a really fast Porsche with 2 turbos that will gap nearly everything on the streets but will comfortably take you from point A to B with supple leather, ventilated seats, and all-wheel drive, you buy a Turbo S. But if you want a GT product that's engaging, rear-wheel drive, hardcore, and has turbos, then the obvious choice is the GT2 RS. If you have a spare $500,000 to $600,000 on hand. But if you want a smaller, even more engaging, albeit less capable vehicle that is still a GT product and comes with a manual transmission and has turbos and is capable of making more power than anyone can actually handle on the streets, you can get a 997 GT2 for cheaper than any of its more modern counterparts. You can find these cars for half, sometimes even a third of what people are trying to sell 991.2 GT2 RSs for. This summer I got to drive a 997.2 GT3 and I was actually surprised that I liked it better than most of the modern GT cars that I've driven. Smaller, comes with a manual transmission, as well as a more connected feel, which for someone who is of average to slightly above average driving ability, who can't realistically take full advantage of the new suspension wizardry or aerodynamic black magic in the new cars, this is for sure the better car, subjectively speaking. If the GT2 from this generation is anything like that compared to the new ones, then I think this is the GT car to have if you want boost and a more connected feel, and that experience can be had at a much better price point. Not to mention, this is a regular GT2, and it kind of sucks that they never made a GT2 again. I think a lot of guys who complain about the GT3 not having any torque down low compared to a Turbo S, a McLaren, or a Turbo Ferrari would have enjoyed one of these a whole lot if they sold these for the 991 and 992 generation. Speaking of Turbo Ferraris, the Ferrari SF90 is arguably arguably the most iconic Ferrari of the past 5 years. Every rapper has one, your favorite YouTuber probably has one, everyone has an SF90, and that's probably part of the problem right there. See, the SF90 was the first non-limited production hybrid from Ferrari and started at over $500,000. So that ballooned fairly quickly in the secondhand market, and before you know it, $1 million SF90 listing wasn't uncommon. What I think happened though is that everyone who could afford an SF90 at $800K to $1 million went and bought one, but then Ferrari kept making more and more and more. So it got to the point where everyone who wanted one could get one, and the exclusivity that allowed it to command such high values no longer existed. And now we even have a successor to the SF90, solidifying it as a standard range car. And that results in an SF90 market that dips down into the $300,000 range. At one point, I swear to God, I saw a listing for $375,000. And honestly, I think that's where the SF90 market should have been to begin with. Because I thought about this question very early on. Like, sure, it's 1,000 horsepower, first standard range hybrid Ferrari, but is this limited? Is this a special few off model, or will there be a special version of the SF90? If this is a regular production vehicle, then why are the values going up so much? It's not like we'll never see another one. And then we started hearing rumors about the SF90 Versione Speciale, and yeah, I think that's when I started noticing values start to plummet. Yesterday's prices are not today's prices, and if you were in the market for something like an old LP700 Aventador, which actually have held values quite well, you can low-key start thinking about an SF90 if you really want to. Honestly, they might drop even lower now that the new car is out. Now, this one's gonna kind of blow your mind, so make sure you strap yourself in your seat, because you can get a Mercedes AMG GT for cheaper than a BMW M2. And it's not like these engines are stranger to mileage either. You can get them in G-Wagons, E63s, C63s, GT63s, and other vehicles that people use on a daily basis and hold their value much better with this kind of mileage. Except with this car, you're getting a much better weight balance and a two-seater sports car with a transaxle dual-clutch transmission. Basically a nicer German C7 Z06 with turbos instead of a supercharger, and an actual DCT instead of an automatic transmission that acts like it wants to be one so bad. Which, by the way, these can be found for cheaper than C7 Z06s if that matters at all. Now, one might argue that what you get with a new Vantage is basically an AMG GT that thinks it's better than everyone. But what you get is the same engine. You lose the transaxle for a ZF8 speed that is used in everything else, which is honestly the lamest thing about this car. But you get an even nicer interior design, an exotic looking exterior, and a shittier infotainment system. I'm not gonna lie. I've never been in a facelift Vantage, but everyone who has tells me that the new infotainment is better. The thing is, you can't get the facelift cars for slightly more than an AMG GT like you can with the pre-facelift cars. It looks incredible. It's undeniably exotic, extremely luxurious if you can get over the infotainment. And even though it uses an AMG bi-turbo V8, I don't think you should tune this car to a ridiculous amount of power. I think it's fine how it is, but the potential is there if you really want to and have a couple screws loose. But tuning these AMG V8s are for sure more expensive than their BMW counterparts, so don't expect to just be able to throw a few $100 at it and get 150 more horsepower. The thing is though, you can find a great deal on almost any Aston Martin these days. For under 200K, you can find a DBS Superleggera with low miles. For under 100K, there are DB11s and DBXs aplenty, which Cars with Miles just said is the best sports SUV out right now. I don't know what he meant by sport SUV though. Like, how do you have a sport utility vehicle? Like, if you want an older Vantage or DBS with the naturally aspirated, arguably better sounding, no, not arguably better sounding, just better sounding naturally aspirated Aston Martin V8 and V12 power plants, you can find some insane deals on these vehicles. These used to be $200,000, $300,000, sometimes $400,000 cars that you can find for more than 50% off in the secondhand market. And having experienced an older DBS, the engines are even more intoxicating than the new ones, even if they are slower. And the interior quality is just on another level when you compare it to other vehicles in its price range. All right, I understand that it's an Aston Martin and all, but why is there leather in the ashtray? And it doesn't feel like you get Audi undertones like in a Bentley or Mercedes undertones like in a newer Aston Vantage or DB12. That being said, if you start to go too old with Astons, you start getting Ford undertones. I've also been in a DB7 Vantage, which beautiful machine by the way. Manual, V12, it's amazing. But if you look a little too hard at certain things, you start to go, hey, why do these window control buttons feel oddly familiar? Why do they look like the ones in my dad's old 2005 Explorer? It took every piece of my soul not to point these things out to the owner, because good God, it really is a beautiful vehicle. The owner didn't seem like the type of guy to have an ego, and if he drove his cars a little bit harder, he'd probably be the type of car guy that I'd want to be when I grow up, but it just didn't feel appropriate. Like, there are guys who will literally go, yo, my Huracan is basically just an R8. Oh wait, I'm not supposed to be mimicking those guys, making fun of them. Those are the cool guys. There are guys who will literally go, yeah, my Huracan is basically just an R8, nothing that much more special. I just like it because it looks cooler and has shorter gear ratios. But there are also guys who will make sure you know their Corvette is one of one, and if you deny them of such blissful ignorance, they will have a conniption. This guy was just a first-time client who hadn't paid me in full for the photo shoot yet, so I wasn't gonna blow it all up. If you want a similar experience, but you want a British car through and through without the German influence, you can get a 5-liter supercharged V8 and an F-Type R. One of the greatest sounding cross-plane V8s of the past 10 years. This is not up for discussion. I will not be accepting any arguments in disagreement. Go argue with your mom, seriously. You can find these cars for $40,000 to $50,000 in decent condition. And honestly, when you start seeing these with 70, 80,000 miles, you might start touching the 30s, I'm not gonna lie. Now, I have personally laid eyes on what at the time was the cheapest F-Type R in the country with the clean title, and it was like it was listed at $23,000, I believe. Now, I'm not gonna lie, if it's this cheap, you probably don't want it. I'm talking it had aftermarket wheels, interior was all the way clapped. I'm talking like, I don't know how an interior gets this clapped this fast, but I don't think you want an F-Type that has 130,000 miles. But luckily for $40,000 to $50,000, you can find them with like 35,000 miles. The new facelift models look so good, but they only come in rear-wheel drive, and the Jaguar community stands by the older rear-wheel drive cars, and I think I'm gonna side with them on this one. That's probably the one to have. I think these cars will be absolutely timeless, and while I've heard about various issues, especially electrical ones that people have with these cars, I think this is gonna be one of those vehicles that people go out of their way to preserve as the decades progress. The C8 Z06 bubble is over, and I don't have an ounce of sympathy for anyone who paid double over sticker for one of these cars and is now upside down in that shit, because you should have seen this coming. How did you not see this coming? You paid how much for a car that isn't limited at all? Man. Just like the Stingray, y'all let COVID production limitations trick y'all into thinking these cars were gonna be hard to get forever. Now we got dealerships trying to give these cars away, and like the SF90, again, I think we've just reached the point where everyone who wanted a Z06 that bad already has one. So we're gonna start to see some really good deals on C8 Z06s, even brand new. I've even seen used examples already dip below $100,000. A modern mid-engine flat plane V8 sports car with a removable roof, almost 700 horsepower, and a clean title has to be the deal of the decade for below $100,000. I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the best one on this list, and if I had to suggest any of them, it'd probably be this one. It seems like they worked out all the manufacturing kinks. The ZR1 just dropped, so the Z06 isn't the hottest, newest model anymore, and values on these cars will continue to get better for the next few years, if you ask me. Like every Corvette though, the Florida ownership will be relatively high, and because of the Corvette tax, the depreciation curve will probably be fairly broad, so you won't see actual cheap C8 Z06s for a long time. I don't even think it's realistic to look for clean C7 Z06s for below like 50K right now. I actually photographed a C7 Z06 a couple years ago that hammered above $90,000 on Bring a Trailer. But if you can't quite find the C8 Z06 that you want for below $100,000, and if I'm being quite honest, it's still a rare sight, I cannot imagine what it takes for someone to buy a 911 Carrera over a C8 Z06 right now. Holy fucking airball. So my younger audience might not remember Maybach. And I'm not talking about the Maybach logo that signifies the highest trim of a Mercedes S-Class. I'm talking about the Maybach, the Maybach that inspired Rick Ross' entire record label. The Maybach that used to be its own company. The Maybach that modified a Mercedes S-Class chassis to make their own car with their own exterior and their own interior. These cars were sometimes longer than a Rolls-Royce Phantom, offered things you could not get in the Mercedes lineup at the time, and were truly a brand of their own, not just a slightly nicer S-Class trim. Maybach was truly the last of a dying breed of coach builders that took a chassis and drivetrain and turned it into something with an identity of its own. Every example of Maybach currently listed on Auto Trader right now has less than 100,000 miles, is listed for less than $100,000, and with a Mercedes V12 should be pretty solid if maintained well. Now, maintenance will be fucking expensive. These cars were like $350,000 in the 2000s. And you may not be getting something that is super exotic, but I thought they were still worth mentioning because you are getting something that is much more luxurious and far rarer than any exotic on this list. From 2002 to 2013, they made approximately 3,000 cars, and that includes all of the special editions and few off cars like the Landaulet and Accelero. There are just over 1,057s and just over 1,062s, which means even combined, these cars are rarer than pretty much every Lamborghini of the past 20 years, every limited run hardtop mid-engine V8 Ferrari, and every Porsche GT product of the past 10 years that isn't a 991.2 GT2 RS, ST, or Speedster. And you can get something like this for sometimes less than $50,000. They won't turn many heads these days, but it is uniquely luxurious in the same way that a Phantom 7 was, even if it does show its age. So if you're whipping one of these, you might not get much attention, but it will bring out all the German car guys who actually know ball. If you still want a mid-engine V8 Ferrari though, and you can't afford an SF90, there is one left where if you can afford to put some options on a BMW M4, then you might be able to make it stretch and afford a Ferrari 360. Now listen, you aren't getting the newest, nicest, fastest Ferrari out there. This is not the vehicle you buy to turn heads driving down the street, at least not anymore. What you still get is a fuel-injected, mid-engine Ferrari V8 of the modern era that is easily manual transmission swappable for under $100,000. Now, being under $100,000 was never really what I was aiming for with this video. It was more so to find vehicles that represents a unique point in the market that allow you to own something with characteristics that you didn't think you could ever possibly afford or aspire towards. And the Ferrari 360, even if you end up spending over $100,000, it represents exactly that. The first supercar I ever drove was a McLaren 12C at 19 years old, and I absolutely did not know what the hell I was doing. Luckily, it was a rented car on an autocross course with an instructor, so all I hit were some cones, but that was a prime example of what I was talking about in my last video. Look, if you want a purebred, undeniable supercar with a twin-turbo flat-plane V8 mounted inside of a carbon monocoque with active aero, dihedral doors, and a bunch of features that would have you thinking this car came out 10 years later than it did, the McLaren MP4 12C might represent the Florida entry into ownership of such a car. At any given time since whenever the 720S came out, there has never existed an absence of great deals on McLaren 12Cs. Now again, I must warn you that the earlier cars have been riddled with issues and the cooler swipe doors, so make sure you do your research. But they are incredible cars whose looks have aged incredibly well, basically shared a chassis with the McLaren P1 and 675 LT, and is still an incredible car to drive. The only modern sports cars that are cheaper than this and are built on a carbon monocoque have half or even less than half of the cylinders in this car. So while you absolutely can go wrong with this vehicle, why not roll the dice? Take a risk.